Hello, my name is Fred, and we're creating this video today for training purposes for the CMC7 poking project. I have our technician Nick that's going to demonstrate the procedure. So Nick, if you'll go ahead. One note I'd like to make is Nick's going to manipulate this printer so that you can get a better view, but please never ever do this in the field. The printer must remain flat on the surface at all times, otherwise there'll be major ink spillage and possible damage to the unit and a whole lot more work for yourself. So Nick, if you could go ahead, I'd appreciate it.
Alright, I'll start with the ink poking process. It's best to orient the printer so that the front is facing towards your right. You will take the provided marker, open that up, and do a small dot right here.
It's the top right corner.
Just touch it. Don't bother to make a circle or anything, just touch it. Make sure there's ink there. Then you need to move it so that you have access to the hole underneath, and give me a moment and I will show that. Said hole is right here. It is much smaller than the screw holes. You simply press in with the provided Allen wrench until you feel it click, and it should release the ink cartridge. If it does not release the ink cartridge after that click, open up the paper receptacle and gently pull on the ink cartridge. It should be located right here. Once that's out of the way, go ahead and insert the poking jig. It just goes directly in where the ink cartridge was. Press the button once, twice to make sure it went all the way through, and then remove the jig the same way you remove the ink cartridge. Again, do not move the printer from a flat position if you can help it. Tilting it slightly is okay, but if you tilt it more than about 40 degrees, it will start spilling ink. Replace the old ink cartridge, move the ink poking jig and tools out of the way, and get your screwdriver. You will of course have removed the power and Ethernet cartridge before, Ethernet cord before doing the ink poke. Sorry about that. The screws you are looking for are at the bottom of the back of the printer. Free the bottom of the back plate, but don't pull it out. Instead, lift and then pivot the entire thing up. Make sure you don't lose track of the screws. The next set of screws you remove are on the side at the top. There are two screws at the top. You are only interested in removing the rear one, which is this one right here. And there's one on each side. Once those screws are removed, gently lift and pivot out the top, and then push forward gently. If you will note, the speaker wire is attached to this small gray item. You can gently pull this free, and it will detach, and you can move the casing out of the way. At this point, you need to remove the tape, which is on each of these screw heads right here, one here, and one here. Make sure to keep track of these, or at least have replacements in electrical tape to cover these screws. Remove those screws. top plate, on the metal top plate, will simply lift out and then up, and you should have that view. Now you need to remove these so that you can remove the side plate. Side plate shifts back and then out, and then you can just pull it out. You will need to replace your Phillips head screwdriver with a small flathead. The crescent shaped opening right here will allow you to move certain gear parts. You simply slide the Phillips head in and then bring it up. Some gears will have very little resistance, some will have significant resistance. Be careful you're not going to break anything. Moving that will allow you to move this, which is the ink head. Ink head moves over to the right, and normally you will see the gear heads in this position. Fred, can you get it so that they can see farther in? Bring it closer and down so that they can actually see the entire thing. I wonder if that'll work. Yeah, that'll work better. So you can see it like this. The gear you are supposed to be checking, and you control access to these functions by moving that gear like I told you earlier, the crescent shaped opening. The gear you are looking for is this white gear right here. Can you see that? No. That's better.
Point it out again.
Yeah. The gear you are looking for is this white one right here. Doesn't show up well. Maybe if I remove that. You can see it just barely. It is behind the entire ink head canister. It controls the sliding of the ink white bar. Looks kind of like a squeegee. Once you've determined the status of light, moderate, severe, or clean, you need to get your Q-tip, which would be this item. You will spray it down with distilled water, or at least extremely clean water. Okay.
Distilled water, please.
And you will clean this by gently running it along. Then you will clean these heads, again by gently running it along. Then you will take your screwdriver and cause the squeegee arm, the ink head cleaner, to extend, and you will very gently use the Q-tip to clean this part and any ink that may be overspilling on the ink head or the squeegee bar. Once you see it in action, it will be quite obvious what you need to clean. You do not need to clean further down on the squeegee bar. Specifically, any mess from this point backwards is not to be messed with. You will only cause further problems. Just leave it alone. That only applies to ink. If you see paper in any location that it is not obviously supposed to be, you need to remove it. At this point, after having cleaned the ink wipe head, you need to go ahead and dispose of the Q-tip, probably in a trash can. I think I'll go do that now. You don't want ink everywhere. You should go ahead and retract the ink head using the crescent-shaped opening. Move the ink head all the way back to the left again. And at this point, and this point only, do you open up the paper receptacle, which is right here. You simply pull and bring it all the way out. That will take the paper roll out, grab your wipe, which is this item, wet it down.
With distilled water only?
Of course. You will clean this head, you will clean this head. It will probably take several wipes. You want to get the entire head. Lightly clean the entire space and make sure to get the entirety of every roller. The objective here is to make sure it's wetted down slightly but not heavily, and make sure any ink particles are removed as much as possible. Finally, before you get done with this, is that a good angle? There we go. There are 2 rollers at the head. It is easiest to get access to these while the paper receptacle is open. You need to clean these rollers as much as possible. A perfect job will not be possible, most likely. You need to go ahead and clean them as much as you can and within an acceptable time frame. You simply, again, your wipe should be wetted down at this point and hopefully not too heavily saturated. You just go ahead and roll along the motion of the rollers, and it should pull off any excess ink. It can take anywhere up to 30 or 40 seconds to clean the entire these 2 rollers. This is where the ink tends to accumulate as far as the rollers are concerned. Once that's done, you go ahead and place your paper back in. Close the receptacle, making sure the paper is tight and not bulging up to any excess on the inside. If it does bulge up to excess, simply pull it through. You can pull the paper as long as you're gentle and you're careful about it. Don't strip the gears. Then you will want to move the ink head, which is this item right here, all the way to the right. This is not actually mentioned in the documentation, but occasionally you will have paper feed errors. If you do it any other way, this will save you time. At this point, you're done with cleaning the machine. You need to go ahead and reassemble. You start by putting the metal position back in place. As a useful tip, the holes will guide you as to where the positioning should be. I like to combine this step with placing the side cover back on. You line up the 3 bottom sprockets, or whatever they're called. Place it in and slide it forward. There will not be a click or anything, the holes will just line up. Go ahead and screw all the components back in. Should be 4 screws at this point. Then, before reattaching the top plastic cover, you need to find your tape components, your 2 electrical covers. Make sure that it goes over these screws. A note of importance: on the right side, you want to make sure that the screw itself is covered, but this hole right here, which is displaying the ink head, is not covered by tape. You do not want to bind the ink head under any circumstances. I generally do this at a 90-degree angle, that way I don't cover anything I'm not supposed to. Take your top plastic cover and you will need to reattach the speaker if you have disconnected it. You can tell what orientation you're supposed to do it at. Yeah. By the assembly, flat goes to flat. This part is flat on the gray head that you're bringing it in. This part is flat where you're pushing it in. You just simply connect them. It pops right back into place. Deposit it where you got it from. Hopefully you remember. And the easiest way to put the plastic ink head in position is to position the front part and then gently slide it back into position and then pivot it down. Go ahead and screw that in with the two coarser threaded screws. And then you take your back plate, position it at the top, and simply pivot it down into place. Lock the back plate in with the two screws. And it's simply a matter of plugging it back in. Once it is plugged back in, you will need to print and clean until you have an acceptably clean test print. You do not leave the printer alone at this point. It will have ink spillage inside it that you need to clear. Obviously, I can't demonstrate that right now. I recommend plugging the Ethernet port in first and then the power. An example of a good test strip, well, I only took that one because I had to, would be this. I don't know if you can see it very clearly. Yeah, it's not showing up at all, is it? Yeah, it's just white paper, unfortunately.
What you'll want to do is, if you'll notice, he's marked a C on it right there, which means it was clean. I would recommend you put either severe, moderate, minor, or clean on this.
Actually, I go with SML or C.
Whatever nomenclature you choose to use will be fine. To complete the project, you will gather all of the test strips. If you'll move that printer out of the way just a second. You'll gather all your test strips. Okay. Here's a copy of the store report form that you'll need to fill out for each store. Once that information is complete, you'll take your test strips and a paper clip, and that's the type of documentation you'll turn into your manager. Well, thank you so much. I hope this is helpful. I appreciate you joining us today. Thank you.